Welcome to Tea and Tarot with me, your host, Yashna. Each week I'll share what I've learned as I dive deeper into the world of tarot. I've got my cards in front of me, my cup of tea, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. This is Tea and Tarot.
Okay, here we go. Hello! Welcome to my first official episode of Tea and Tarot. If you can't tell from my tone, I am so excited to be doing this and to document my journey as I learn more about tarot. As I'm starting this journey, I think it's important to know where this interest started for me and why I'm doing this podcast about learning tarot. I've always been super interested in storytelling, especially ancient mythology and how different societies explained weather phenomena, explained different happenings in the world, and sought comfort during trying times. I'll admit that a lot of this interest first stemmed from reading Percy Jackson as a child, who didn't, and being enthralled by Greek and Roman mythology. And that interest just expanded to a lot of other facets of storytelling. Kind of along those lines, I've also always loved reading fantasy novels or novels that pull themes from these kind of collective stories. And for the life of me, I cannot remember what the book was called. I tried to look it up and I cannot find it, but there was a book I read, might have been a series, in middle school or high school that was loosely based on the characters in tarot, in that there was an empress character, there was a magician, there were a lot of the different characters and themes that closely match the major arcana in tarot, and it was so interesting to me. And that really sparked my initial interest. Granted, I didn't do anything with that interest for a really long time. Fast forward to COVID and the pandemic, and I, along with many other people in the world, jumped on the bandwagon of polishing up on some old hobbies and interests and just taking on entirely new hobbies. My birthday fell during the peak COVID pandemic when we were still in high quarantine, so I couldn't go out and do anything. And because I had shared some of this interest, my mom actually gifted me the Rider-Waite tarot deck, which is one of the classic decks out there, along with a learning guide, a book which had a lot of information about what tarot is, what the cards mean, all of that. And again, I got this over 4 years ago now, and I have not dived into tarot as much as I thought I would. It's been a long time, and I kind of thought about why I didn't dive into it so much. And a little over a year ago, I was chatting with one of my old high school friends who's also super interested in tarot. She has done readings for me in the past and has inspired me to learn a lot more about the subject. And as she was doing readings for me, she had a deck that I felt way more pulled to. It was the Light Seers deck. And I realized part of why I hadn't dived into this world as much as I had was I didn't feel connected to my old Rider-Waite deck. It didn't inspire me to try and connect with it more and learn more about tarot. So after being introduced to this deck and also just kind of browsing online at all these other decks that exist out there, I decided to buy myself the Light Seers deck. And ever since I've gotten it, I have felt way more connected to my cards. I feel a lot more invested in learning about tarot and getting better at this. Now, it's been over a year since then, so again, did not magically make me start doing this, but what a lot of it comes down to is I just haven't committed the time to learning. I haven't really sat down and just put aside that time that you need to learn something new and to really feel more comfortable doing it. So, sidebar, I have also always wanted to start a podcast. I've always thought podcasts were really cool. Since high school, I've always had different ideas about what I want to do a podcast on, and I decided why not kill two birds with one stone and make a podcast about learning tarot and just take on this massive challenge. Because obviously, if I couldn't commit enough time to just learning tarot on its own, I definitely have enough time to be making a podcast and doing way more for it. I kid, obviously, but I do think it'd be really cool to document this journey. I think it will hold me a lot more accountable to checking in every week, actually learning new concepts, and then sharing it out, which, if you haven't heard this before, I think teaching others something is the best way to also make sure you really know it and you've learned it, because now you're trying to explain something you've read elsewhere to someone else, which has always been really helpful for me. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm documenting my journey to learn about tarot and share it with all of you. Now, I'm sitting in my apartment as I do this, so I'm really hoping there is a you out there listening to this podcast and who finds it as fascinating and interesting as I do, so that I'm not on this journey alone. But either way, I am really excited to be doing this. And here we are. Also, I want to make a full disclaimer at the start of this podcast series. If you hear any fuzziness or video lighting is weird, if you're watching this on YouTube instead, I apologize in advance. This is very much a hobby project come to life in my apartment. Like, if you're watching the video, this is my apartment. It's not some hi-fi studio, and I'm doing all of this recording, editing, and posting on my own. And I'm not a audio or video editor. I do not have those professional skill sets. So please bear with me. This is something I'm really excited about and really want to try and do well. And so to wrap up this first episode, thank you for listening to all of that rambling, but I did want to share my short and sparse tarot journey till now, so you kind of know what my starting point is as I dive into this with you. In the second half of this episode, I am going to do a tarot reading for myself. I think this will be a really fun thing to do to wrap up each episode. Whenever I have the chance, I'm going to do a reading for one of my friends or for someone else, but most of the time it'll probably just be a reading I do for myself in prep for the upcoming week. And it'll be interesting because these readings are actually going to be released up to 2 months after they were actually read. So a lot of what I'm talking about, a lot of what I'll read for myself may not even be applicable anymore, but it's still really fun for me to do this reading for myself now, and then almost nicer that it won't be shared out on this podcast until later on when it's no longer what I'm living in that moment. So it'll be funny to listen back on these and kind of see where I was at this time. I'm currently recording this one in the last week of August, so if that gives you some time frame. So as I've mentioned in this episode, I am very beginner to tarot, so I'm not going to be trying to do anything crazy with my readings. I'm going to start really simple as I do this reading for myself, and then even in the future as I do readings for friends. So I'm planning to do a simple 3-card spread for myself. Traditionally, when you pull your 3 cards, the first one is representative of your objective, what you're trying to achieve. It should resonate with what you're asking the cards. The second card should be a major obstacle or something that's going to be blocking you. And then the third card is usually, what is the path towards your goal? What do you really need to do to get there? So that's what I'll be doing. This is also the first time I'm recording myself doing a reading, so it'll probably be a bit awkward, but I wanted to share it out. Yeah, so here we go. For those watching the video, in front of me is my gorgeous Light Sears deck. To start the reading, I will be taking it and I will be shuffling the cards while thinking about what I want to focus on in this session. For me right now, I am really curious about career, and that is what I am going to be focusing on. I am starting a new job tomorrow, which is really exciting and very nerve-wracking. So that's definitely at the forefront of my mind and what I am thinking about right now. So I'm going to quiet down a bit while I finish shuffling my cards. Cards are shuffling. Okay, I have finished shuffling my cards and now I am going to split them into 3 piles. So I'm just going to split these where it feels natural, where it kind of wants to. And now I'm going to flip them over. So looking at this first card in front of me, like I said, this one is supposed to be pretty representative of my goals and what I'm trying to achieve. And it is the 9 of Swords. Interesting. That was not what I was expecting, I'll be honest. I would think of that more as an obstacle card than a first goal setting card. I'm a little nervous now. Second card is the Ace of Wands. Okay. And third card is Death and Rebirth. Very interesting. These cards all generally make a lot of sense for what I'm trying to think of and what I'm trying to seek advice on for myself, except the order is really weird. So I'm going to be back in just a moment. I'm going to kind of consult my little Light Sears manual on the cards' meanings and make sure I know what I'm looking at, and I will be right back. I am back after reviewing my cards, and honestly, as I'm looking at my spread and I'm thinking about how I want to think about my cards, I have 2 different frames of thought. One of them is to read them as is, as I drew them, because that is true to the spread, that's true to how I drew them. Another part of me just wants to swap the card order and give slightly different meaning to each of them, which I guess maybe I can talk through each of the cards' meanings and then kind of talk about how those 2 different approaches would give different meaning, and maybe it's not that different, but the 9 of Swords is representative of fear and paranoia, usually what keeps you up at night and being trapped by that fear and by that negativity. In the context of this kind of shaping what I'm asking and what I'm seeking, it could mean that I'm stuck in the past. So when I'm thinking about career and what I want to do moving forward, there's a part of me that feels a little stuck with what I've been doing till now. And that is causing a lot of anxiety and a lot of paranoia stepping into this new role, which could make a lot of sense. The second card is Ace of Wands, which is really representative of new potential, especially pulling from creativity and inspiration. So really looking at something new, looking at creating, really tapping into your own potential and trying to inspire yourself to create something new or to just be creative. So this one could also be really interesting as an obstacle where in my prior role, I was in it for a a really long time. I was in that prior role for 3.5 years. So I could see how being creative and really figuring out how to step into this new role with renewed inspiration and coming at it with a different mindset could be tricky. So maybe that is what I need to keep in mind. And then this last card is Death and Rebirth, which is really interesting as a draw because obviously I'm changing careers. So death and rebirth of my job and that general career. It is also a major arcana card, which is representative of major milestones and shifts in your life, while the minor arcana are more day-to-day items. Major arcana usually represent something big is happening in your life, which definitely resonates with what's going on in mine right now. So that one's definitely interesting, and it being in the place of what I need to keep in mind in order to really achieve my goals and move forward, kind of reads as really accepting that my old role has come to an end and I'm on this new path, and then just charging forward with that. So yeah, the spread does make sense. It still is not the most straightforward spread to me. Part of me is also reading it as death and rebirth being kind of what is my goal and what am I trying to achieve, because it's death of my old role, rebirth of my new one, this major milestone in my life, this major shift. Nine of Swords feels more like the obstacle card. And then Ace of Wands is kind of what I need to do, what I need to keep in mind to achieve that. And that feels more natural to me. That makes a lot more sense. So I think I'm going to interpret it that way. Either way, with tarot, anytime I've done readings for friends, and I've only ever done readings for friends and family, I always say the thing to keep in mind is tarot is really about self-reflection and what you take from it. So regardless of the order I'm putting these cards in, I think the lessons and the takeaways that I get from each of the cards is similar. So it's still a very accurate reading. It definitely resonates with where I'm at right now and what I feel stepping into this new challenge tomorrow. So yeah, this is super interesting. Sorry, this is so awkward. It's weird to record myself doing a tarot reading for myself and having no one on the other side to actually tell me if this makes sense or not. But I very much enjoy being able to do tarot spreads for myself, to do them for friends and others. Thank you so much for tuning into the very first episode of my podcast. I am so excited to be doing this and to be sharing this journey with all of you. Join me next week as I dive into the history of tarot and how it has come to be what it is today, and do a career reading for one of my friends. This has been Tea and Tarot. Thank you for listening to Tea and Tarot with Yashna. This episode was produced, hosted, and edited by me, Yashna Bunsel, and brought to you by Tea Time Podcasts. The tarot reading was done using the Lightseers deck by Chris Ann, and all card visuals were from the Lightseers deck and the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. Music was made using SoundRaw. Join me next week for another episode of Tea and Tarot.